Cool. All right, let's go ahead and get started. People are still rolling in. I don't want to keep us waiting too long. Some of you were here on time and we've only got an hour. I'll keep clicking on admit all. For those of you who are new to our chat space, please note that on my title slide, there's a web address at the bottom. That web address is at the bottom of every single slide. So as newcomers join us, they can follow along. So hopefully you're in the right session. This is about redesigning lessons for deeper learning, and I'm very glad to have all of you here. So thank you very much. My name is Scott McCloud. Some of you know me from my website, Dangerously Irrelevant, or maybe on my Twitter feed at McCloud. I'm an associate professor of educational leadership at the University of Colorado, Denver. I prepare principals and superintendents. I also have the very fortunate opportunity to work with schools and educators all over the world in terms of helping facilitate some of the school transformations that you heard Pam and Yang and others talk about in our keynotes last hour. So again, that web address is at the bottom of every slide. Get yourself there so you can follow along as we go. So we were tasked as breakout groups. The first thing we're supposed to do is we're supposed to send you all into breakouts, small breakout groups, to talk about what resonated with you from the keynotes. What are some of your key takeaways? Remember that we also have our hashtag, a new way forward, to do that. So I'm going to give us about 10, 12 minutes or so to have those small group conversations, make sense of what we just heard of the last hour. Then we'll dive in and go from there. So here's the way this is going to work. So I'm going to send you to a Padlet, and if you've gone to that web address, what you will see is that on this slide, there's a link to our Padlet space. So I'm going to send you into a breakout group, right? You're going to be breakout group 6 or 12 or 20 or whatever, right? And I don't know who's going to be in your breakout group because Zoom will do it randomly, which will be fun. And just go to whatever group you're in, right? Introduce yourselves real quick, and then just start talking about those two key questions that I gave you. So if you're in breakout group 12, just go to the group 12 column in Padlet. If you're in breakout group 20, go to the group 20 column in Padlet, right? Click on the little plus for your group to add a note, pick somebody to type for your conversation, and then just go. And here's the link to access your Padlet at the bottom of this screen, right? So we're going to send you there in just a sec. Remember, our two big questions are what resonated with you from the keynotes and what are some of your big takeaways or meaning that you made from all of that. So with that in mind, I'm going to send you into your breakout groups. So here we go. There we go. All right, everyone. Have fun. Have a good conversation. Remember our two questions. What resonated with you? And what are some big takeaways? See you in, let's call it 10 minutes. Bye.
How's everybody today? I was in a breakout room by myself.
Hi,
Did
Brian.
others have that problem?
Same
Really?
here.
All right, let's send you somewhere else.
I clicked on the join break room 14 link and Zoom crashed.
All right, those of you who are still here, I'm going to try again to send you all somewhere. Hang tight. All right, who's left? Everybody should have a room to go to. All right.
Not yet.
All right, for the rest of you, let's put you in breakout group 20. All right, you all are now officially breakout group 20. Have a good chat.
Thank you. So I was in most impressed.
Okay, so we're just going to talk here.
Hi there.
I'm having trouble getting onto Padlet.
Hi, Marjorie. So on slide 6, did you get my slide deck open?
I opened up a link that said to join, and then it brought me to just a screen that looks like a Zoom screen.
So first of all, do you have my slide deck? Because the link to the Padlet's from there.
Okay, I don't, I'm not sure. I'm still learning all this, so.
Sure. All right, hang tight. So here's the web address again.
Is it the
Yeah, the bit.ly
website
ANWF.
that you gave us at the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. All right,
Yeah,
I gotcha.
If you go to slide 6, there's a link to the Padlet.
Gotcha. All right, we're good.
All right, have fun.
Thank you.
Yep, you bet.
Thank you.
A few people are working on such things, but the larger reality is I've not heard one suggestion really, other than getting kids internet access and getting them devices, that's going to change the nature of sort of education in terms of it being this more equitable kind of place. And so, you know, while I have some of my own ideas, that's my concern, is that people are not creating actual, you know, people are not designing and sharing actual learning experiences that will change the classroom in the ways that everyone in this sort of meta narrative is talking about what we should do. So I'm wanting to make sure that there's some action that happens moving forward toward August or September, whenever school starts, which is why I you know, wanted to sign on to this specific session to see what advice people have around designing, you know, better lessons and not just pontificating or preaching about the need for change. I mean, some of these folks, you know, Young Jazz been talking about this for like 15 years or something, and Carlos, going back to 1995, started building a new education vision, and I think we need more specifics.
Well, I sat in on a good session this morning that TechCrunch put together with Mitch and Frida Kapur. He was the guy that did the original spreadsheet, Lotus 1, 2, 3, and he and his wife have been kind of social impact investors now for about 20 years or so. And they just went through things that people in their portfolio companies were doing to sort of close the gap. That's what they invest in, is companies, startups that are trying to close the gaps. And there were things like a summer program in math for students that wanted to learn math and weren't learning it in school, women particularly. There's a thing in San Francisco called Women's Audio Mission, which teaches women engineering without ever telling them they are, because they're teaching them how to do audio stuff, and they get jobs. There's a friend of mine who now works at Digital Promise, but she used to do pop-up schools on Saturdays. She'd use the same school, and she would just tell all the teachers to tell all their students, if they wanted to try something new, to come on Saturday, have their parents bring them on Saturday. And she said People created entirely new learning experiences because they were all there because they wanted to do something about learning. So I don't think we have a lack of ways of going about it. I just think people have to focus on it and want to do it.
I think the discussion around assessment is really interesting, and having waived the assessments this year and we all survived, no one's worse off for not having given them. But really listening to teachers I'm in Vermont, trying to figure out, wanting to focus on the learning rather than the grading and, some of the, I like if it's Googleable, it's not a good assessment. So, and I think assessment really drives instruction. So if we can help people with those kinds of demonstrations of learning, which aren't too far from what they were doing in the classroom, because I don't know that we can expect teachers to do something they've never done before in this remote environment, but how can we support them in getting kids to provide evidence of their learning and really focusing on that and believing in the intelligence of children of all ages too.
I agree, Pam, but go ahead. There is a little bit of a narrative out there amongst parents that, I'm worried that my child is getting behind, and there are educators talking about this is just going to increase what you call the summer slide or the summer melt, some of that as well. And so this predominant narrative around like that if you can't, I'm in Texas now. I used to be in Denver, but that if you're not assessing it now, like what's going to happen with testing next year, and I'm quote unquote getting behind, whatever that means. Like we're all supposed to land in a certain place on graduation day and be able to move forward. And it's a funny narrative, but I understand why people think it, and I'm worried that there's a lot of that messaging that's out there. So there's a lot of really progressive language happening on this chat today, but in other larger circles. So I'm also worried, Michael, to your point earlier about the scaling of such things. So the programs you mentioned are awesome, and how do we scale such things and give people permission and give them the specific know-how of how to try those other kinds of things. And that's where I feel like beyond inspiring us, it's like, okay, let us follow now and show us what to do. I mean, I have my own ideas about that, but again, I don't view myself as like needing that. I'm here to be even further inspired. So that's why I'm waiting to hear from some of what, or see some of what Scott's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Get ready to roll up your sleeves because we're going to get at it.
Okay, Scott, I assume that you're at the downtown campus?
Yeah, I'm at the downtown, yeah.
Yeah, I used to live about 2 or 3 minutes away from there, over near Sloan's Lake.
Yep, got it. Cool. All right, everybody's coming back. Here we go. All right, we're rolling back. We'll give folks just another minute to come back here. Here comes everybody, flipping over. Sorry, Zoom takes a while to get everybody back, apparently. We're up to 66 and counting. All right, cool. I'm going to share a screen again and we're going to roll. So welcome back, everybody. I want that one. Yep. That one. There we go. Good. Somebody give me a thumbs up. Can you see Breakout on the screen? Yep. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, cool. So some of you may be familiar with my work. The kind of work that I do with schools is really focused around 4 big shifts, right? So, you know, I think what we're seeing is we're seeing schools all around the world are recognizing how do we have kids live at the deeper levels of learning more often, right? So how do we increase the cognitive complexity of student work so that kids are focused more on critical thinking and problem solving than they were before, maybe less time on recall and regurgitation. That's shift number 1. Second big shift is really around student agency. It's around how do we give kids control and ownership of their own learning more often, as opposed to being so teacher-directed or system-directed. Multiple benefits accrue when we move towards student agency. One, of course, is that we typically get increased student motivation and engagement. The cognitive psychologists tell us that the number 1 factor in human motivation is autonomy. Nobody likes to be micromanaged, and we micromanage kids all the time in schools. But when we give them some voice and choice, you know, that also allows us to personalize better or individualize and differentiate better. And all those are powerful things for us. The third thing to recognize is that a lot of deeper learning schools are trying to engage students in more authentic real-world work opportunities and learning opportunities, right? So rather than keeping kids isolated and siloed within the classroom, how do we get kids out and engage with their local communities, online or global communities? When we do that, kids stop asking us questions like, why do I need to know this? Why do I care? What relevance or meaning does this have to me in my life? Because they can see those real world connections. And then finally is the shift from analog to digital. That's an important shift in and of itself because we live in a digital and hyper-connected online global information landscape these days, but it's also powerful because that 4th shift is a lever that really allows us to do the first 3 in more powerful ways, right? So we can have kids do more authentic work with tech than we necessarily can without it. We can have students exhibit more agency with tech often than we can without it. So that's the idea. So for those of you who are new or just joining us, there's a web address at the bottom of each slide. It's the same web address. This is the slide deck that I'm working off of, so you can catch up as we go along. So those are sort of the 4 big shifts that I work with, but I think, you know, what we're seeing here is that in response to the pandemic, is that we're not seeing much of those shifts happening right now, right? And so I've been interviewing school leaders all around the world. I've been talking to school leaders and educators across the US, China, Italy, Saudi Arabia, right? And I think what I'm hearing, I've been trying to do some initial meaning making out of all this, is that right now, most schools are in phases 1 and 2, right? So if you look at this chart, you know, a lot of schools are just trying to still figure out basic access issues around not only food to children and families, but also computing devices, internet hotspots. How do we attend to basic, you know, SEL and health needs, you know, checking with families to see if they're okay. And then when the school district kind of gets beyond that and is ready to talk about learning, it's mostly talking about pretty low level learning, right? It's that sort of worksheet and homework like learning work for kids because that's the easiest stuff to get out. Right? It's the easiest stuff to get out by non-technology fluent teachers. It's the easiest stuff to print off some packets and shove them in a backpack and the non-internet access family can pick them up, right? That's sort of the things that we can do right now. We're seeing a lot of sort of rapid teacher training in technologies right now because they didn't have the skill sets from before. And that's all good, and we might expect some of that. You know, it's been a crisis and everybody's trying to ramp up as quickly as we can, and we can recognize that all that's happening in a non-judgmental way. And we can also recognize that our kids deserve more than that, right? Our kids deserve more from us as school systems than low-level factual recall and procedure regurgitation now and in the months to come and next year and so on. So that raises the question for us then is then how do we get there, right? How do we start moving our schools into phase 3, maybe even during our pandemic response? And how do we really start sliding into phase 4 where we look ahead and we not only are paying greater attention to equity concerns, but we're also designing future learning opportunities based on the skill sets we're acquiring now. So kind of keep in mind phases 3 and 4. We'll circle back around to those later in this session together, and recognize that right now where most schools are is probably phases 1 and phases 2. Again, for those who just joined us, our web address is at the bottom of every screen. You can catch up on the slide deck and we'll go from there. So with that in mind, I want to introduce to you an instructional redesign protocol. There's a link on the slide to the 4 shifts protocol. I'm going to go ahead and go there so you can see what I got. The 4 shifts protocol is an instructional redesign protocol that's designed around those 4 shifts that I just highlighted. And the idea here is that we can use the 4 shifts protocol to redesign existing lessons and units in ways that accomplish some of those deeper learning goals that I articulated. So within the 4 shifts protocol, you'll notice that there are 4 sections. They correspond exactly to the 4 shifts that I described before, right? So here's the deeper thinking and learning section. And as you can see, we ask questions like, not only are you focused on disciplinary knowledge, but are you focused on big important themes and concepts that are central to that discipline? In other words, are you focusing mostly on trivia and minutia, or are you really getting those big important concepts that we want kids to have? Let's see, here's another question. Are students getting an opportunity to engage in deep critical thinking and analysis? Are they engaged in complex and messy rather than simple problem solving? Do they have a chance to be creative, to design, to engage in that important metacognitive work that we know builds brain cells and so on, right? That's sort of the goal of section A, which is deeper thinking and learning. Section B, which is really around authentic work, asks important questions like, are students get a chance to take on an authentic societal role? Within that role, do they get to use the same kind of practices and processes and tools and technologies as people in the field? So for example, we know that how historians operate is different from how scientists operate, which is different from how artists and business people and writers operate and so on, right? And so do we give our students a chance to experience those same practices and processes and tools and technologies as those people in the field outside of school? Down here, this authentic assessment piece is really big in section B, right? Or do we give students a chance to create real world products or performances for very authentic audiences? And do we take that work outside the classroom or the school building so they can contribute to the outside world around us? If you move to section C, which is where we're going to play today, you'll see a lot of questions around student agency, everything from what's being learned, how it gets learned, how you show your knowledge, who's the main driver of the talk time or the work time. Do you get to do work that's reflective of your interests or passions as a student? Do you get an opportunity to initiate or go beyond? Do you get to pick which technologies are used? Are you the primary user of the technology? Those are sort of the things that live in section C of the protocol. And then finally, down in section D, which is that tech infusion shift, we'll see a lot of emphasis on rich, robust communication and collaboration, because so much of how we communicate and collaborate these days is mediated by technology. And then a few questions at the end around things like, is the technology adding value in ways that aren't possible without it? And are those digital technologies overshadowing or masking a lack of substantive learning? So that's sort of a quick overview of the protocol and how it works. So now let's go back to our slide deck real quick and tell you how we're going to proceed here. So we're going to focus primarily on section C today. We only have time to live together for one lesson, but we're going to redesign one lesson together collaboratively. And so here's section C again, right? And what we're going to do here is that I'm going to show you a lesson. It's going to be a quick video snippet. It's a couple minutes. You should be able to hear the audio as well. And what I want you to do is I want you to just be thinking about these questions in section C. And when we're done watching the video, we're going to use these questions as a diagnostic. We're just going to kind of run through the questions and see what our answers are, right? We always use the protocol items first as a diagnostic because it's important for us to agree on what we see or don't see. So without further ado, I'm going to play this video. Paul, I can see you on my screen. So give me a thumbs up if you can hear the audio. All right, here we go.
In this whole group lesson, I use the interactive whiteboard, videos, and still images from websites to teach a lesson about pioneer life, specifically as a way of studying places from the past. In other words, We use technology to give us a richer understanding of life before this level of technology. In this lesson, I want my students to compare diverse places that people have lived over time. I begin the class by showing a video segment from Discovery Streaming, Different Kinds of Shelter.
The reason the houses are the way they're made is because of where they are.
So after we watched this movie, what did we learn about the differences between homes in the past and then homes that we live in now? Video is a powerful tool to help students visualize life in the past and in the present. This helps them understand why the homes were so different. What else?
They use different materials.
In order to prompt students to compare houses of the past with houses today, I show them several primary source photos from Discovery Streaming, Places, Learning How Houses Have Changed Over Time. I also use photographs from the Library of Congress, the American Memory section. We select one or two of these primary source documents of Pioneer Life to focus our class discussion. To assess student learning, I have the students draw a picture of two types of houses they learned about. For this, we used technology that was available in both homes, pencils and paper.
All right, so now you've seen the lesson. So now it's time for us to go through the items in section C and answer verbally each of the 9 bullets. So in the interest of time, because I want you to have as much time as possible in a small group to do the redesign work, I'm going to run through these myself because this is not the important part, right? So learning goals. Who selected what's being learned here? For the most part, it's the teacher, right? She seems to be making most of the decisions about the learning content, what gets learned today. Who selected how it's learned? The teacher has articulated some very clear pathways for students to learn today. Students don't have much choice here, it doesn't look like. So again, the answer is teacher. Who selected how students demonstrate their knowledge and what they know? Again, the teacher here. Who's the primary driver of the talk time? Who's making decisions about who does the talking, when, what about? That's clearly the teacher. It's pretty much classic call and response here. Who's the primary driver of the work time? The teacher is directing the kids in terms of how the work proceeds. Is student work reflective of their interests or passions? I don't know. You got any first graders who are super excited about, you know, historical homes? I don't, maybe if you're lucky, but probably not. So the answer here is probably no. Do the students have the opportunity to initiate, be entrepreneurial, self-directed, go beyond? Doesn't really look like it right here. Again, it's a tightly constrained lesson. Who picked the technologies? The teacher did. Who's the primary user of the technology? Again, it's the teacher. And so for the most part, this is a pretty teacher-centric lesson here, right? We could argue whether a couple of these are both or somewhat, but it's predominantly teacher, 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 and no, no throughout section C, right? And this is a pretty classic elementary teacher usage of the interactive whiteboard as well, right? So the teacher throws stuff up on the screen and then pushes information out to kids. They respond, and then there's some kind of, you know, regurgitative assessment at the end. But here's the power of the protocol. What we're finding is that the power is not in the diagnostic. The power is in the redesign pivot. So let me explain to you what that means. The way we use the protocol is we can take an existing lesson or unit like this one. We can say, what do we want to focus on? Do we want to focus on deeper learning? Do we want to focus on authentic work? Do we want to focus on student agency? Whatever, right? In this case, we're going to pick student agency and say, all right, within student agency, if we want our students to have more agency in their own learning, maybe that's a team goal or a school goal or a district goal, right? Then how do we get there? Well, the first thing we do is we use the questions as a diagnostic in section C, and we say, maybe we're already there, right? If we go through all the bullets and we're getting, you know, multiple answers of students, yes, yes, and we like those answers and we can pat ourselves on the back, woohoo, we achieved our goal of student agency, we're doing all right. But if we're not quite there yet, and that's the important language, we're not quite there yet, right? We set the goal, we say we're focused on student agency. These questions just help us, you know, look forward and think about those things. Then we can also do redesign pivots. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna send you back into small groups. And what I'm gonna ask you to do is I'm gonna ask you to pick a couple of these bullet items. Pick a couple bullets and say, what if you wanted the answer to be student instead of teacher? For example, right now, the teacher is the primary user of the technology, that last bullet, technology usage. What if we wanted students to be the primary users of the technology? How would you redesign this learning activity to get to that answer instead? So now we're gonna do the redesign pivot from teacher to student, And we're going to say, how do we redesign this so that student becomes our answer instead? Right now, the teacher is the primary driver of the talk time. What if you want students to be the primary driver of the talk time? Let's do that redesign pivot from teacher to student, right? And say, how do we get there instead? Maybe right now, learning activity is very teacher driven. We want it to be student. Again, we do the pivot. How do we get there? Maybe we want that interest-based bullet to move from no to yes. Again, we do the pivot. If we want the answer to be yes, how do we redesign this to make that happen? And what we're doing here is we're doing these redesign pivots on just a couple bullets. And what it does is it moves the entire activity closer to student agency. So just like before, we're going to use section C. I'm going to send you back into your small breakout groups. There's a link to Padlet. When I reassign you to groups, you may show up in a different group this time, right? So last time you might have been in group 3, this time you might be in group 12. That's okay. Just add a new note under whatever group you're in now. Click on the plus and just share your redesign thoughts that you and your group come up with. And there's a link to the Padlet right there off the slide. For those of you who are new here, we have our web address at the bottom of every single slide. So you can access that as well. So I'm going to give you 7 minutes to work with your small group and say, how can we give these first graders, these 6-year-olds, some more student agency? How could we take some of those items in section C, do the redesign pivot? We want the answer to be this instead of that for these couple bullets. And what could this activity look like instead that would give students some more voice and choice in their own learning? So that's the goal. I'm going to send you into breakouts. Here we go. Oh, I got to stop sharing first. Hang on. All right. Into breakout rooms you go. And I'll see you after 7 minutes. Awesome. Friends, are some of you left? You're not in a breakout room? Who's with me in the main area? Okay. For those of you whose breakout room wasn't happening for whatever reason, let's just talk right here, okay? Put your camera on and let's chat.
Hi there.
Hey there. So, thanks for joining me. So what ideas do you have? What could we do with this lesson using some of those questions from section C?
So yes, I think finding out where the pupils come from, what they're interested in. So I can imagine a situation where we ask students where they live or where they have lived or where their parents have lived, bringing in pictures, and then defining, why did they live in this house or that. I know there's probably some sensitivities about the social status in relation to those houses or wherever they lived, flats, campermans, mobile homes, this kind of stuff. But I think I would start where the children are and then take it from there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if it's not even their own home, it could be kinds of residences that they see around them, right? So how do you say your first name?
It's like Hoover without an H, Uwe.
Uber. Okay, so which bullet point would we be playing with there?
Let me just get the point up.
Sure.
So some of that is the learning activity and the learning goals. I guess the learning goals might be set by the teacher to frame the activity.
Maybe. I mean, if we ask students to bring in different images of residences that are around them, right? Then maybe we could start with an inquiry stance. We could start, having students generate questions about what they want to know, right? Which would allow us to move that learning activity bullet with students, right?
Yeah, and then it's probably facilitated by the teacher.
Yeah, absolutely.
Depending how many different perspectives are coming in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you may have some learning outcomes that you want students to achieve as part of this lesson, but, it's a co-negotiated with the students, right? So where the teacher has some learning goals that they want, maybe the students also have some things they want to know. The teacher can help break out into small groups. If we have kids doing some independent investigations, that of course moves that talk time bullet over towards students and away from teacher.
Yeah, yeah.
So move that technology usage bullet towards students as well.
So then I guess it depends on the age of the students, the pupil. You could negotiate the assessment as well. Because if you have the learning outcomes, you can say, okay, what do we want to produce and how do I assess that? What is a good quality XYZ?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, even 6-year-olds will have some ideas about some different ways they can show their learning. Like they don't all just have to draw a picture, right, with crayons.
Yep.
Yep. So these are some ways to play, even with, grade 1 students, where even young students can have some voice and choice in how they're doing. And obviously, as kids get older, we can ramp some of this up and give them, more possibilities.
Yep.
So I wonder, it would be interesting also to play around with that initiative bullet on the protocol. And feeding off some of those student inquiry questions and say, where could we go with this next, right? Like, how could we connect our in-class learning to the community, for example? And then we're just quiet and let the kids talk. Or we could go visit some places. We could talk to some people. We could, whatever, right?
Certainly what I've done when I was in the US in high school, we had pictures. It was a photography class, so we had pictures from a town in the Bay Area in California from, I don't know, 100 years ago, and we went there, or I went there and took pictures of what it looks like now, and then you can start looking at what the changes were.
All right, we're starting to roll back. So who wants to share? Well, we'll give people another 30 seconds. That'd probably be polite. All right, people are rolling back. We've got about 30 seconds for everybody to join us, so we'll wait for them. Here they come. Fun. All right, wait for the last wave here. Almost there. Cool. So let's hear from a few of you. What are some bullet points that you played with? What are some ideas that you had? What did you hack at? Who wants to volunteer something that their group talked about? Remember that the assignment was to give some 6-year-olds some more voice and choice in their learning with this activity. So what did y'all talk about? What ideas did you have? What bullets did you shift? What redesign pivots did you make? Somebody raise your hand or unmute your mic, either one, and just share what you got.
I'll share for our group. This is Stephanie. We really looked at, we started off looking at the work time, talk time, and then it sort of bubbled over into the assessment for learning.
Cool.
And we were thinking that if, for example, you put kids into small groups and they looked at one type of housing and it was with some limited choices of resources, they are young, and that they were then going to create some way to share with the rest of the class so that it was sort of assessment for learning as opposed to being told exactly the way they must share. So why does this type of house look the way it looks given the limited number of resources to look at? And it would shift the talk time and the work time to being more student directed with a lot of guidance. You know, they're young, so you'd need to structure it pretty carefully as the teacher. So that was mostly what we talked about.
Awesome. Stephanie, thanks for kicking us off. Appreciate you sharing
Sure.
the conversation. Somebody else played around with similar bullets, different bullets? What are some ideas your group had for giving these 6-year-olds some more voice and choice?
We started thinking about like questions about the topic. So just if you had, we weren't really sure where to start with it because we weren't sure if it was like pioneer life was the topic or if it was about his, housing, who knows what it was about. But just to say like, what do you wonder about this? And then we talked about doing stations. So they would have choices within the classroom and they would be able to do more talking within those stations. So we really kind of just started moving it from the top down on the list.
Yep. And is that Mary? Thanks, Mary. Yeah, and you'll have to decide how much choice you want to give first graders, right? Sometimes they can roll more, sometimes they need more structure. So a centered or station approach is probably pretty smart here. So particularly if you had one that was kind of like open-ended and inquiry focused, right? So cool. What else? Somebody else played around with a couple bullets.
This is Rita. We were just discussing, how you don't necessarily have to give them if it's not Pioneer Life, or if it's Pioneer Life, maybe it's an aspect of Pioneer Life. Instead of just housing, maybe you're exploring housing, maybe you're looking at the food, maybe you're looking at, different aspects of Pioneer Life instead of just that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rita, I think that's a good point, is that, you don't have a lot of detail on this lesson, right? But sometimes the what that is being learned is not actually required by the curriculum. It was a choice that the teacher made, right? So sometimes the what that's being learned is non-negotiable. Like you're not going to get through this math class without learning how to, add fractions, for example. But on the other hand, sometimes it's just a choice that we made as an instructor and we can open that up, right? But even if the what is non-negotiable, you got 8 other bullets in the student agency section to play with, because there's lots of ways to learn things, for example, right? So maybe we can't flex on the learning goal, but maybe we can flex on the learning activity, for example, right? Or maybe we can flex on that assessment of learning and student work products. Like there's other places to flex, even if the what itself is not there, is non-negotiable, whatever. Somebody else want to share something that the group talked about? So a way to flex and give these students some choice and voice?
So I noticed, I was in group 5, and I noticed that group 5, and let me just double check and see which one it was. Group 8, we had some very similar ideas, which was we were focused on, I think it was like choice of assessment of who, actually it was initiative and assessment of learning. And we went with like a design-based framework. So we thought of the purpose of the unit is to compare homes of like historical or whatever. And so we started thinking about like, well, maybe you could design, you know, the home that first graders know the most about is their own home, but they also love animals and animals have homes. So how could you design that? And then we just got into a whole lot of design-based talk. But anytime you're thinking at the level of design and giving students the agency to, within certain constraints, and those constraints can be guided by the teacher or guided by the text that's under study, you know, within those constraints, allowing them to be creative is the best way to really get them to drive their own talk and to hit the initiative pedal and all the other stuff that I think is up here.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. That was great. And I think I really like the idea of shifting or connecting to animal homes, right? Because human homes are designed for a purpose based on certain environmental and climate conditions, right? And so are animal homes. And so making that connection between why does this animal home look this way or that way, now let's map that over to human houses, right? We can, like you said, we can square the circle. You could have some really robust conversations, even with these 6-year-olds, where we put them into an inquiry stance. And instead of just having them regurgitate back, here's some different houses that I saw, to really think about the why of structures and what they're designed to do, and then under what conditions, right? And that would all be so much more awesome than what we just watched, right? So cool. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen again, because we're kind of getting a little closer to the end of our time. And so I hope that you all had some awesome redesign conversations like that one. You know, the basic way to use the protocol is just what we did. So you take an existing lesson or unit, including one you're doing during remote emergency instruction, right? And you say, which section of the protocol do I want to hack at? Deeper learning, authentic work, student agency, tech infusion, whatever, right? And then you would use that set of questions first as a diagnostic. You just run through the questions, you would try to answer them verbally. How am I doing on this section? If I like my answers, awesome, pat yourself on the back and celebrate, woohoo! But if you're not quite there yet, then we introduce the idea of the redesign pivot. Okay, fine. So not quite there yet, but you know, my goal is more student agency, my goal is more deeper learning. And so let's pick a couple of those bullets and let's do the redesign pivot. We're gonna shift toward the desired answer and we're gonna redesign for it. What we know is that, you know, as you try to move instruction towards deeper learning and more authentic work and student agency, that doesn't happen by magic. You have to design for it. So the purpose of the protocol is to give you those concrete look-fors and some specific think-abouts that will help you do the shift. Okay, great. I'm going to go to that section in section C. I'm going to pick 2 bullets. I'm going to try and move the answer from teacher to student, from no to yes. I'm going to make that redesign pivot. And guess what? After we do that redesign, we're closer to our goal of giving kids more agency. And if you do that work collaboratively in particular, it's pretty helpful. So Paul said, you know, at the beginning of all this, before we launched, it's great to hear, you know, Pam and Yang and crew and Carlos talk about the need to shift, but how do we do it? And that was really the impetus behind the protocol, is to give educators and instructional and tech coaches and principals and anybody else who's a curriculum leader this toolbox of questions, right? That's what a protocol is for, that we can design around. So the protocol has actually launched pretty fast around the world. It's been out about a year and a half now. And I think it's taking off in schools for several different reasons. One is it has those concrete specific look-fors and think-abouts. You want more agency? Go pick a couple, say I want this one to be student instead of teacher. I make the shift, oh look, I got more agency. I went up to deeper learning. I picked that complex, messy problem-solving bullet rather than simple. I shifted it from simple to complex. Oh, look, I've now dived, you know, our kids are thinking more deeply than they did before. That's the idea, right? We took our kids' work products in section B, which used to be within the classroom. We moved them to make some kind of contribution to an authentic audience outside in the real world. We can answer yes to that question now. And lo and behold, right, our work is more authentic and relevant than it was before. So that's the idea. We do that in a non-judgmental way, right? We are not going to say to any teacher, hey, you know what, your lesson sucks. What we're going to say is we're going to say, what are you trying to make happen, right? which of these sections do you care about? Which one do you want to try and deal with the protocol? And then let's help you get there, right? That's the purpose of the protocol, is to really just kind of help you get there. If you like your answers, awesome, celebrate. If you're not quite there yet, let's put our heads together and figure out how to do a couple redesign pivots and get us closer on the way. Some of you are familiar with some of the tech integration frameworks like SAMR or TPAC. SAMR in particular feels very judgmental to me, right? We're going to take a teacher, we're going to put her at a level, you're an S, and we'd like you to be an R, for example, right? And the first thing that teacher does is that the teacher feels defensive. She also doesn't know what to shift, because all SAMR does is it puts her at a level in a ladder. It doesn't tell her what to move. Whereas in the 4 shifts protocol, it gives you concrete things to move toward. So, you know, it does no good to tell a teacher, we'd like you to move from substitution to, augmentation or whatever, if the teacher doesn't know how to already do that, right? The protocol is also very flexible. What we're finding, for example, is that it accommodates a variety of different comfort levels and starting points and skill sets. So maybe perhaps Gareth is ready to take an item in section C and go really far with it. Stephanie's going to take that same item and go shorter steps because, she's not quite ready to go further than that yet. And then maybe, Paul is going to take this left turn and go this way. We're not quite sure where he's going to go. And it's all fine because we're all still moving in the right direction. So we really try to honor teacher intention and purpose here. You get to pick the section. You get to pick which bullet points. You get to pick how far and what direction you go on that bullet point. So there's lots of flexibility here for people to work it in with whatever their sort of starting points and comfort levels are. We're also finding that the protocol is a nice bridge to more complex inquiry and project-based work. If I say to Pam, hey Pam, you're a relatively traditional teacher and we want you to start doing these massive 3 and 4 week PBL projects, like that's a really big jump for Pam, right? But if we can say instead, Pam, what we're going to do is we're not going to ask you to make that leap. We're not going to ask you to go from giving kids little agency to giving kids agency for 4 weeks, like you'll just be chaos. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to say, let's take that lesson that you have next week. Let's take like 2 days of it, and let's try to do a couple small tweaks and shifts using section C, right? Let's give your kids agency for a couple days, try it out, see how it works, learn from it. What we're doing is we're building Pam's capacity and we're building her students' capacity to get to the more complex work over time, right? So then we'll learn from that, we'll wait a week, then we'll come back again and we'll say, we still care about student agency. This time we'll do a 3-day deep dive on a couple different bullets in student agency than we did last time. We'll practice with those, we'll see how it goes. And again, we're not asking somebody to do a 4-week jump, we're asking somebody to do a small shifts within existing lessons or units. So that's kind of the idea. So with that in mind, I'm going to kind of hop back out here again and see what kind of questions you have. And in particular, as you sort of see how this process works, how might you use the protocol either this spring during your emergency room remote instruction or later this summer when you're planning for next year? Who's got ideas?
Hi, this is Del Rose. Hi, as an instructional technology coach, this is really exciting me.
Thanks.
Because not just for the tech integration bullet, but just to to facilitate shifts such that teachers aren't scared.
Mm-hmm.
They don't run the other way when they see me coming. That I like the manageability of this protocol. I like the fact that it respects teachers as experts. And yes, I'm really excited to see how this fits into my practice.
Thank you very much, Rose. Appreciate it. So, I mean, that's the goal, right? The goal is that to try and create some specificity that people can anchor some redesign conversations around. And when Julie and I made the protocol, we just weren't quite finding what we needed out there. So we keep coming back to the question of technology for the purpose of what, right? And then we answer the what, and then we start redesigning around some of those items within the what. So somebody else, thoughts on how we might use this thing this spring with emergency remote lessons or later this summer as we plan for next year?
This is, it says Kinzer McTavish, but that's my son. I'm Christy McTavish. When I think of this, first of all, I feel like I'm coming to this at the end of a year when it has been brutal to try and help a private school understand what deeper learning is about. That's the best way I can put it. So this is extremely, I know going to this online, format, why I'm so excited is there has been such a need or this focus on we have to get all of the standards in. We must do this and this. And the beauty of it is it forced our teachers to say, what are those priority standards? Because you can't replicate what was in the classroom. So what are those priority ones? And I think to do that, I think what you've shown us here with this protocol allows us to use them, look at them hand in hand to really decide what are those really important standards that we've got to focus on. So I just want to say thank you. I wish I had known about this earlier.
Yeah, you bet. So we're kind of near the end of our time here, so I'm going to wrap up, but I'm also going to stick around for anybody who wants to keep talking, and I'll just keep recording for anybody who wants to hang along. So, but Mary, you can see my slides again? Yes? Okay, thank you. So, you know, I think that even in the subsistence survival mode that we're in right now, that we can start playing in the few weeks that we have left in the school year, right? Let's look at some of those assignments we're sending out to kids and saying, how could we tweak them a little bit and give them some more opportunities to be deeper thinkers, to maybe do some more authentic work, to have some more agency, to use technology in a different way rather than just submitting assignments back to me, right? Like there's lots of things to think about within the protocol, and we could pick a couple bullet points and just play. But then as we think about next year, right, and we come back with some new technological and pedagogical skill sets, hopefully we can use the protocol to start redesigning new lessons and units or modify existing ones that we have to start moving in some directions we need to move, right? Because again, those 4 big shifts don't happen by magic. You have to design for them. And so that's the purpose of the protocol. So keep thinking about, you know, how can we get out of phases 1 and 2? How can we start moving towards phases 3 and 4, either now or in the near future? And, you know, with that in mind, I'll just say, you know, we're appreciative of all of our sponsors for this conference and the chance to dialogue with you all. The protocol is free. You just go to bit.ly/4shifts. And there's a ton of resources around the protocol as well. So if you have the access to the slide deck, you know, with the web address at the bottom, you have access to this thing here. And please stay in touch with me. I'm happy to answer any questions or do a follow-up conversation where we do some brainstorming about how to use the protocol in your own work, in your own setting. I do have a link to an attendee form here. If you fill out this attendee form, it's just a simple Google form, I will send you some follow-up resources, which may be useful to you. So I'll encourage you to do that as well. And otherwise, thank you very much. There are some additional resources down below this slide, right, along with my contact info that you can dive in deeper, everything from the book that we wrote and some new online modules that we created around the 4 shifts and some other learning opportunities that may be of interest to you. So I'm going to say thanks, and this is our official close. We're only 2 minutes over, so sorry about that. And then anybody who wants to stay and chat, I'll just field questions or comments. So otherwise, thank you, everybody. Good luck, and hope the protocol is useful to you. Keep practicing with it.
Thank you.